Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy you're here today with us to talk about an important topic, using English in formal conversations. Whether you're at work, in school, or just in a setting where you want to be extra polite, knowing how to speak in a formal way can be very helpful. I'm Emma, and here with me is Max.
Hi, everyone. Yes, formal English is super important in many places. It helps you sound polite, respectful, and, honestly, very professional. Think of it like dressing up in nice clothes for a special event. It's a way to show respect and make a good impression.
Exactly, Max. Let's start by talking about a big part of formal conversations, greetings. In casual settings, we might say, hey, or what's up? But in formal conversations, we often say something more polite, like hello or good morning.
Yes, hello and good morning are great for formal conversations. And if you're meeting someone new, you might also say it's nice to meet you. This shows respect and a little bit of warmth too. It's like saying, I'm happy to be talking with you.
And when you respond, you can say, it's a pleasure to meet you, too, or even just, likewise. These words show you are listening and happy to connect with them.
Another thing we can do is use titles. If we know someone's last name, we can say Mr. or Ms. and then their last name, like Mr. Smith or Ms. Johnson. This is very common in formal conversations, especially if we don't know the person well yet.
Yes, titles are very polite. Sometimes people also use sir or ma'am to show respect. So, for example, if you're in a formal setting, you might say, excuse me, sir, or thank you, mom.
It's good to know how to keep the conversation polite throughout. If you're asked something you don't know or need a moment to think, you can say, let me think about that, or I'll get back to you on that. These phrases are polite ways to show you're taking the question seriously.
And don't forget, it's really important to show interest in the other person. In formal English, we often ask questions like, how are you? Or how has your day been? It's a small gesture, but it can really make a difference.
Yes, it shows we care about the other person's feelings. When they answer, we can respond with something like, I'm glad to hear that, or I'm sorry to hear that, if they tell us something sad or difficult. This shows respect and understanding.
Yes, it shows we care about the other person's feelings. When they answer, we can respond with something like, I'm glad to hear that, or I'm sorry to hear that, if they tell us something sad or difficult. This shows respect and understanding.
Also, instead of yeah, say yes, and instead of nope, just say no. Using these words keeps the conversation more respectful.
Absolutely. And let's not forget one of the biggest parts of polite, formal English, saying please and thank you. If we need to ask for something, we say, could you please? Or would you mind? Adding please shows respect for the other person's time and effort.
Thank you and I appreciate it are also very important. And if someone does something small for you, you could say, thank you very much, or I really appreciate that. It's a small detail, but it really makes the conversation polite and friendly.
And if we need to apologize, we can say, I'm sorry, or I apologize for that. It's good to add a little explanation if it's helpful, like, I'm sorry for the delay, or I apologize for any confusion. This helps to keep the conversation smooth and positive.
Right, and when we agree with someone, we can say, I completely agree, or I think you're absolutely right. It's more polite than just saying, yeah, or sure, and when we disagree, we can say, I see your point, but, or I understand. However, this way we can express our opinion politely.
That's a great point, Max. And when we want to end a conversation politely, we can say something like, thank you for your time, or it was a pleasure speaking with you. These phrases help us close the conversation in a friendly and respectful way.
And don't forget, Emma smiling and making eye contact are also important in formal settings. Even if people can't see your smile, like in a phone call, they can hear it in your voice. It makes you sound friendlier and more interested in the conversation.
Absolutely, Max. Using body language, even just a friendly expression or nodding when listening, can add so much warmth to a formal conversation. It shows that you're engaged and care about what the other person is saying.
So, in this part, we've talked about greetings using titles, polite words like please and thank you, showing interest, and ending conversations with respect. These little steps help make any formal conversation smoother and more enjoyable.
Yes, and with these basics, you can start using formal English in your daily life.
All right, so let's keep going with more on using English in formal conversations. We've talked about greetings, polite words, and how to keep a respectful tone, but there's even more we can do to sound professional and friendly. Today, we'll get into using phrases for starting discussions, sharing opinions, and handling disagreements.
Yes, one really helpful part of formal English is knowing how to start discussions politely. If you want to bring up an idea or start talking about a topic, you could say, "If I may, I'd like to discuss," or "Could we take a moment to talk about?"
Exactly, and you could also say, "There's something I'd like to mention." It's polite and gets the other person's attention in a respectful way. So, rather than just jumping into a topic, you're inviting them to listen. It's like gently knocking on a door before entering a room.
That's a nice way to put it, Max. Another way to show respect in formal conversations is by asking for permission before sharing your ideas. For example, "Do you mind if I share my thoughts, or may I add something here?" This way, you're being considerate and showing that you value the other person's opinion as well.
Right, and once we start sharing our ideas, it's helpful to use phrases that show we're being thoughtful, not just direct. Instead of saying, "This is what I think," you could say, "In my opinion," or "I believe." This makes the conversation feel softer and more respectful.
Yes, and you can also use phrases like, "From my perspective," or "As I see it." These are excellent for adding a bit of your own viewpoint without sounding forceful. It's a polite way to share opinions, especially if the topic might be sensitive or personal.
Now, when we're listening to someone else's ideas, it's respectful to acknowledge them, even if we have different thoughts. For example, we could say, "I see your point," or "That's a good perspective," and if you want to add to what they said, you might say, "Building on what you mentioned," or "Following your idea."
Yes, those are great. And when we disagree, it's really important to be polite. Instead of saying, "No, I don't think so," try saying something like, "I understand your point, however," or "I see what you mean, but I have a different view." This way, we're disagreeing without sounding rude.
Absolutely. Disagreeing politely is a big part of formal English. Another good way to disagree gently is to say, "I respect your opinion, but," or "While I see where you're coming from." I think using these phrases helps us keep the conversation respectful, even if we don't fully agree.
And here's a tip. If someone seems upset or really passionate about their idea, using polite language can calm things down. For example, saying something like, "I appreciate your thoughts on this," or "Thank you for sharing your perspective," can show that you're open-minded, which can ease any tension.
Yes, Emma, and another thing to keep in mind is how we speak when we need to clarify something. Instead of saying, "What do you mean?" in a direct way, we can say, "Could you please clarify that?" Or, "I didn't quite understand. Would you mind explaining a bit more?"
Those are great examples. Max, we could also say, "Would you mind going into more detail?" Or "Could you elaborate on that point?" These phrases are polite ways to show you're interested in understanding fully, without making the other person feel like they did something wrong.
Right, and sometimes in formal situations, we might also need to agree to do something together or collaborate on a task. For example, instead of saying, "Let's do this," we could say, "Perhaps we could work on this together," or "Would you be interested in collaborating on this?" It sounds inviting and respectful.
And if someone agrees to work with us, we can say, "Thank you for being open to this," or "I appreciate your willingness to collaborate." Showing gratitude, even for small things, is a key part of formal English. It really makes others feel valued and respected.
Definitely, and here's another important point: asking questions respectfully. Instead of saying, "Why did you do that?" which can sound a bit strong, we can say, "Could you share your reasons for that?" Or, "What led you to this decision?" This keeps the tone friendly and non-judgmental.
Yes, great examples, Max. You can also say, "I'm curious to know more about your thought process." It's a bit longer, but it shows that you're interested in learning about their perspective, not just questioning their actions.
So, when it comes to showing respect in formal English, small things make a big difference. Whether it's starting a discussion, sharing opinions, or even disagreeing, using polite phrases creates a positive atmosphere in the conversation.
Another helpful tip is to use I statements instead of you statements. For example, instead of saying, "You should try," you could say, "I think it would be helpful if." This keeps the focus on your opinion rather than telling the other person what to do.
Yes, that's so true. Saying "I feel" or "I think" makes it clear that we're just sharing our thoughts, not giving commands. And remember, in formal conversations, being a good listener is just as important as speaking well.
Absolutely. To show you're listening, try using words like "I understand," "I see," or "that makes sense," and when you nod or smile while listening. Even if they can't see you, they can often hear it in your voice, which adds warmth to the conversation.
And let's not forget about handling difficult topics. If we need to bring up a problem, it's helpful to start gently, like, "I'd like to discuss something that's been on my mind," or "There's a small concern I'd like to address." This keeps the tone friendly and reduces any tension.
That's a great point, Max. If we want to give feedback or talk about something challenging, we could also say, "Could I offer a suggestion?" Or "Would it be all right if I share an observation?" This way, the other person doesn't feel criticized, they feel supported.
And when we receive feedback, it's polite to say, "Thank you for sharing that," or "I appreciate your thoughts on this." Even if the feedback is a bit hard to hear, this response shows that we're open and respectful.
Yes, and if we're ever in doubt about what to say, using polite words like "please," "thank you," and "excuse me" can always help. Simple phrases like these create a respectful and positive conversation atmosphere.
So, we've talked about how to start discussions, share opinions politely, handle disagreements, ask for clarification, and give and receive feedback. These phrases and habits can make us sound more respectful and thoughtful in any formal English conversation.
And with a little practice, these phrases will start to feel natural. Just remember, formal English isn't about being overly serious, it's about showing respect for the person you're talking to. It can even make conversations more enjoyable.
So, we're back, and we've already covered a lot about how to use polite, formal English. I think we should finish by talking about a few more advanced tips, things that can really help us make a great impression in formal situations. These tips might include managing conversations, responding to unexpected situations, and wrapping things up politely.
Great idea, Max. Let's start with a common challenge: staying calm and polite when something surprising happens. For instance, if someone interrupts us, it's easy to feel frustrated, but we can still handle it politely. Instead of saying, "Wait, I'm still talking," we can say, "If I may finish my thought," or "I'd love to hear your input in just a moment."
Yes, that's a very graceful way to handle interruptions. You're asking for a bit more time without sounding upset. And if we're on the other side, maybe we accidentally interrupted someone, it's polite to quickly say, "I'm sorry for interrupting. Please go ahead." This shows respect and lets the other person know we're listening.
Exactly. Another thing to consider is how we respond if we don't understand something right away. Instead of just saying, "I don't understand," we could say, "Could you clarify that for me?" Or "I'm not quite sure I follow. Could you explain a bit more?"
And if someone asks us a question that we aren't sure how to answer right away, we can use polite language to ask for a moment. For example, "That's a great question. Could I take a moment to think about it?" Or "Let me reflect on that for a second." It's totally fine to take our time as long as we're respectful in our response.
Those are great examples, Max. I'd also add that sometimes, in formal settings, we may need to bring the conversation back on track if it goes off topic. A polite way to do this is by saying, if we could return to the main point, or to circle back to our original discussion. It's a gentle way to guide everyone back to the main topic without sounding bossy.
Yes, and it's really useful in work meetings or professional discussions where time is limited. Another useful tip is how we can politely give suggestions. Instead of saying, we should do it this way, we could say, one possible approach might be, or perhaps we could consider. These phrases invite others to share their thoughts too.
And when we receive a suggestion from someone else, it's good to show appreciation, even if we're not sure about the idea. For example, thank you for the suggestion, or I appreciate that idea shows respect. And if we're not quite ready to agree, we could say, I'll need to think about that, or that's an interesting perspective.
And if we want to politely disagree with a suggestion, we can soften our language by using phrases like, I see where you're coming from, but, or I understand your idea. However, my concern is, this way, we're not dismissing the idea but sharing our thoughts in a considerate way.
Those are really helpful phrases. Now, another important skill in formal conversations is knowing how to manage the flow when it's time to pass the conversation to someone else. For example, if we're in a group discussion and want to include someone, we could say, Emma, do you have any thoughts on this? Or I'd be interested to hear what Max thinks about this. It's an inclusive way to make sure everyone has a chance to share.
Yes, it makes people feel valued and included. And if someone asks for our opinion directly, but we don't have a strong answer at the moment, we can say, I appreciate you asking me. Let me think about it, or I'll pass for now, but I'm interested to hear what others think. This way, we're showing respect for their question while giving ourselves more time.
Exactly, and when it's time to wrap up a conversation, it's important to end on a positive note. Instead of just saying goodbye in a formal conversation, we could say, thank you for this discussion, or I appreciate your insights. It's a nice way to show that the conversation meant something to us.
Yes, and if we want to stay in touch or continue the conversation in the future, we can add something like, I look forward to speaking with you again, or let's stay in touch. It's polite and leaves the door open for more conversations down the line.
And if we're closing a business conversation, we might say something like, thank you for your time today, or I look forward to our continued work together. Little details like this can make us sound professional and show that we value the connection.
Great point, Emma, and if we're saying goodbye in a written formal setting like in an email, there are some polite ways to close as well. Instead of ending with bye, we can say best regards or sincerely, followed by our name. These small touches make a written message feel respectful and polished.
Yes, and in written messages, it's also good to start with a polite greeting like dear name or hello name instead of just jumping into the message. It's a small but important detail in formal communication.
Right, and just like in spoken formal English, saying please and thank you in writing makes the tone much more polite. For example, could you please send the report? Sounds much better than just send the report, and after they send it, a quick thank you or I appreciate your help goes a long way.
And that goes for written apologies, too. If we need to apologize in writing, we can say, I apologize for the delay or I'm sorry for any confusion, adding a sentence to show you understand the impact, like, I understand this may have caused inconvenience, shows that we care about the other person's experience.
Exactly, Emma. So, as we can see, whether it's speaking or writing, the key to formal English is being polite, respectful, and thoughtful. It's about showing we care about the person we're communicating with, even if we're just asking a simple question or saying goodbye.
Yes, and these phrases and techniques can help us in so many situations like job interviews, business meetings, or even in customer service. With a little practice, they'll start to feel natural and help us make a great impression in formal settings.
So true, Emma, and remember, formal English doesn't mean we have to sound like robots. We can still sound warm and friendly. It's all about showing respect and being considerate.
Well, we hope this podcast has been helpful for you. Practicing formal English can open a lot of doors, and it really helps in making strong, respectful connections.
Thank you all for joining us. We hope you'll take these tips and try them out in your daily conversations.
And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel and share it with your family and friends. There's so much more to explore in English, and we'd love to help you on your learning journey.
Yes, we'd love to have you with us. Thanks again, everyone. Take care and happy learning.